Linguistics is the scientific study of human speech and language, and especially the structure of human language. Now, a large part of understanding linguistics is understanding how dialectal and sociolectal variations can exist within a language. That is, how two people that are speaking the same language can still sound very different because of their dialect. Now, in this video, I want to talk about a very interesting aspect of dialectal variation, and that is the dropping or replacing of vowels, consonants, syllables, or even words when someone is speaking. Now, to understand that, though, we first need to talk about prestige. Oftentimes within a language community, a certain dialect of a language can become associated as the prestige language, or the most correct method of communication. Now, this most correct method is often called the standard form of a language, which implies that the other dialects of the language are incorrect or wrong in some way. Most linguists agree that there is no inherently correct method of speaking, but rather due to the history of a language, a certain dialect can become associated with an upper or higher social class or group, which makes it seen as the standard form. In order to avoid confusion, I'll be calling the most understood dialect of a language the standard form for the rest of the video. As I touched on earlier, a very common way that dialects will differ from the standard form of their language is by dropping or replacing sounds when they're speaking. This is a sentence in English. It's a pretty simple construction. There are no big words or crazy grammar rules going on here. And I want you to think how you would pronounce it. If someone was speaking in a standard form English American dialect, then they would probably say something like, "I'm going to go to the store." Now, that's a perfectly respectable way to pronounce it, except that's not how I would pronounce it if I was speaking in an informal sense, like if I was talking to my friends or family. If I was doing that, I'd say something a lot more like, "I'm gonna go to the store." Now, let's look at the differences between these two pronunciations. That little upside down E letter, by the way, represents the sound that I make. My informal variation of that sentence completely replaced the words "I am going to" with "I'ma," and then replaced almost all of the vowels in the sentence with the sound. Listen. I'm going to go to the store. I'ma go to the store. I'ma go to the store. If someone was learning English in a classroom environment, they might only be taught that first formal method of pronunciation, which, depending on who they're talking to, could be disastrous, as if they're talking to someone like me speaking an informal dialect, that they won't be able to understand what I'm saying. Of course, this doesn't only exist in English, so let's look at an example in... There are lots of examples of dropping or replacing sounds like this in Spanish around the world, but three very common ones are dropping the S's, also called eating the S's, ending N nasalization, and voiced consonant reduction. Take a look at this sentence. Los estudiantes quieren ser abogados, or the students want to be lawyers. What I just said is an example of the standard form of Spanish in a lot of Latin American countries, but as you know, that's not how a lot of people would say it. If someone were to say that sentence using the three aspects I mentioned, it would sound a lot more like Los estudiantes quieren ser abogados. During my 3 years of high school Spanish, I was only ever taught the formal pronunciation of any words or phrases, which might make it very difficult for me to understand someone that's speaking in a different dialect. Next, I want to talk about a perhaps even more extreme example. In the Latvian language, speakers will sometimes drop complete words from their sentences while speaking. This is sometimes called eating words. For example, take a look at this sentence here. Man būs jālasa tā grāmata rīt, jo es esmu students. Or, I will have to read that book tomorrow because I'm a student. Some speakers of Latvian, however, will instead say, Man jālasa tā grāmata rīt, jo esmu students, completely dropping the words būs and es. This is because the words surrounding them already provide enough context for the meaning, making the addition of būs and es somewhat redundant. For example, the word būs makes it so that it is a statement that will be done in the future, but the addition of the word rīt or tomorrow already implies that it's happening in the future. Similarly, the word es is the first person singular pronoun, but the word esmu, which has already been conjugated in the first person singular form, makes the addition of es unnecessary. Now, you may not understand a lot of what I've said in this video, especially in that last example, but that's okay. What I want to get across in this video is that a lot of people communicate in a lot of ways that we may not expect or may not be taught about, and I think that we should learn. Studying a language can be very rewarding, And I think that when you study a language, it's very important to learn a lot of the dialectal variations that exist in it. There are some people that think that there's one specific way that a language should be used, and that all other dialects are slang or incorrect. L'Académie Française, for example, believes that French people should only use the word courriel when they're talking about an email. Millions of French people around the world, though, just say email. If there's one thing that I would want someone to take away from this video, it's that people communicate differently, and if we take the time to learn each other's dialects and inflections and accents, then we can understand each other even more.